This is my leader.
There you go.
And I'm ambitious for him.
Yeah, good on you. Thanks, Como.
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man. I will not.
Did he knock back the crystal? I don't think so.
So we have a very clear plan for jobs and growth.
Alrighty. Today we're joined by Wayne Farnham, the member for Narrowcan in the Parliament of Victoria. Before entering politics, Wayne spent many years working in the construction industry, giving him a strong perspective on housing, construction and business. Since being elected, he has been vocal on issues affecting regional Victoria, including jobs, housing, government spending and the economic direction of the state. With the 2026 Victorian state election approaching, we'll be discussing some major issues facing Victoria today and the damage that 12 years of Labor government have done to this state. Wayne Farnham, welcome to Jobs and Growth.
Great to be here. Let's do it.
Let's get into it, Wayne. So I think we'll start. If you could just give us and the audience a bit of an overview of what is your pathway to politics?
My pathway? Oh, well, that's fair. Basically, Gary Blackwood, the previous member, back in 2018 said that was going to be his last term. Now, me being a member of the Liberal Party, I looked around the room of the membership and I went, shit, I'm the youngest here by about 20 years. But that aside, I actually had a chat to Gary and said, look, I'm thinking of running, put my hand up for pre-selection. His response was, you're a bit rough around the edges. I said, well, you don't worry about that. And I said to Gary at the time, actually, I remember saying to him, well, look, if you find someone better, let me know and I'll step back. Like, we've got to do the best thing we can for not, just a Liberal Party, but the electorate. So, 4 years goes by and 3 years goes by, sort of 2021, I was still the last man standing, I suppose, and put my noms in for pre-selection. No one else put a nomination in, so bang, here I am.
But if you wouldn't mind, could you go back a bit further than even that? Why did you join the Liberal Party when you did?
Sure, always voted Liberal. Funny story, one of my real highlights as a kid was I met Malcolm Fraser at the Warrigal Pool. Malcolm Fraser came down at the time with the candidate and there was hundreds of kids and we're up on the fence and I was in between the gates. There was a big surge and I got pushed through the gap in the gates because I was only a skinny little runt. And I landed right at the feet of Malcolm Fraser. He was a big, tall man. And there is a photo of me shaking his hand. And he actually looked very much like my father, believe it or not, Malcolm Fraser. So, but why did I join the Liberal Party? Always voted Liberal. I think as a lot of us younger people, we sort of just tend to do what our parents do, They go, vote Liberal, vote Liberal. Well, I voted Liberal. But I joined because I'd always been a Liberal supporter, but my values aligned with Liberal values.
And what are those values?
Look, I believe in aspiration. First and foremost, I think, if you work hard, you should be rewarded, not having the living shit kicked out of you by taxes, left, right and centre. I'm massive on home ownership. I think this government in particular has let down. Home ownership hasn't been a focus of theirs. I mean, the whole mantra is build to rent. Like, how unaspirational is that? But home ownership, especially for younger Victorians your age, is really important because home ownership gives you security to start with. Like anyone that's rented, and I've rented, prior to owning a home or whatever, you're wondering after every 12 months, do I have to move? Like, is the landlord going to kick me out, whatever. So first and foremost, home ownership actually gives you security and it's really important. Second thing is, and there's always arguments fors and against, but I believe if, you own your own home, you're investing in yourself. You're not investing in someone else's property. When you're renting, you're paying off someone else's mortgage. It's better to pay off your own mortgage at the end of the day. So that's one of my values, is aspiration. The other one's freedoms, and a lot of people say, well, what are freedoms? Well, freedom nowadays, I believe, is having small government. not big government.
And what does small government look like? Because that's a term that's thrown around, and I want to hear what you actually think that is.
Sure, if you didn't interrupt me, I was about to tell you.
Sorry about that,
No,
Wayne.
that's all good. It's all good. Look, we see government at the moment inserting themselves into everything, right? Everything we do, government want to say in what we do. Even, look, working from home, okay? Already 63% of Victorians voluntarily work from home. That's an agreement between them and their employer. We're not against working from home. What we are against is government telling us what we have to do every day. You know, so when we talk about work from home, the government's going to legislate work from home, I go, well, what happened to the choice? Because that should be a choice. And that comes down to freedoms, right? And that's one example of the government inserting itself. They tell us what we can and can't say. They tell us how we have to work. They tell us who we have to employ. You know, you go through a lot of, when you're quoting a government tender, it will say, you need to have X amount of this, X amount of that, X amount of this, X amount of that, all right? That's big government. That's government controlling everything we do of every aspect of our lives. Get government out of the way and let people flourish. Let people prosper. Let business prosper. Because when that happens, business employs more people. There's more jobs. You know, there's more investment. And that's really important. You want a state to be economically viable, let government get out of the way and let people do what they do. Like, it's freedom of choice. It's a beautiful thing. So I think under this government, especially under particularly the last decade, that has been eroded.
Definitely. If you wouldn't mind, I want to backpedal to the work from home. Obviously, the Allen government has their proposal they're taking to the election to make enshrine it that people can work. My understanding is that is, for the most part, industrial relations is federal legislation. How much can she actually do with state legislation on that front?
Don't know. Buggered if I know. I mean, the government's talking up a big game from work from home, but we still haven't seen legislation. Right? We don't even know what's in the legislation. The government hasn't put it forward. Arguably, it is a federal responsibility, for sure. I think the government's bringing it in under the Equal Opportunity Act. How that legislation looks, we have no idea. You know, no idea. And to reiterate what, you know, our position on working from home, we are not against it. We're absolutely not against it. But are we going to support the legislation? What's in the legislation? You know, do I think it will probably get challenged? I think it probably will. I think if it goes through this parliament, there'll be business groups that will be rightly worried about it, and I think that will get challenged in the High Court. Now, if that happens and the High Court rules in favour of, rules against the government, well, then it just shows you how inept the government is, that they've introduced a law into Victoria that wasn't legal. Now, that's all hypothetical, of course, because nothing's come forward and nothing's gone through the parliament. But I can see something like that playing out.
So, yeah, you're a first-term MP. Is there anything that surprised you about how the way Parliament works? Or
Well, you got to remember, I had no bureaucratic experience is the best way to put it. I wasn't even on local council. I went from builder to politician or member of parliament. So, you know, the first 4 months I was scratching my head thinking, I don't even know what they're talking about. I mean, they're talking about moving motions. I'm thinking the only motion I move is in a toilet. You know, so I had no idea what moving a motion was. But probably one thing that would surprise a lot of people, and a lot of people really only see what happens on telly. You know, we're in question time. We're all, you know, yelling at each other or trying to get the good one-liner in. There is, you know, to make a difference in your electorate, you have to get along with the government, because if you're just a total arsehole 24/7, then no one's going to talk to you. So for me, being especially an opposition backbench, I'm not in shadow ministry, I needed to make those connections, because when something goes wrong in my electorate, I need government's help to fix it. I can't fix it. I don't have the checkbook. So probably one thing that surprised me the most was, you know, how you can get things done from opposition, providing you got the right mindset. But don't get me wrong, in that chamber, I'll go as hard as anyone in the chamber.
Yeah.
Like to me, once I hit that green carpet, gloves are off.
Yeah.
I
White
don't
line
care.
fever.
I don't care. Yeah, white line fever. I don't care who it is, what the issue is, whether it's the Minister for Health, the Premier, Minister for Roads, whoever, gloves are off. You're not doing the right thing by my community, I will verbally whack you every day of the week. So, verbally, I'll put that in.
You know, back to what you were saying about freedoms and whatnot. Do you reckon Victoria is a nanny state with how it's run? Yeah.
Shit, yeah. Cross. Absolutely, it's a nanny state.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you go to other places around the world, like, you know, just travel anywhere and you sort of think, well, you know, it's not bad here. We get, you know, we can do this, we can do that.
Yeah.
I think we've gone too far on, as I said, you know, I think government has inserted itself in everyone's lives. And I think I said this in my inaugural speech, was when I said, you know, parents should parent, teachers should teach. You know, it's not up to government to tell us how to parent or to tell teachers how to teach. Yeah. You know, and teaching should be ABC, you know, 1, 2, 3, maths, English, whatever, you know, back to basics teaching is what it should be. It shouldn't be a doctorate that is forced down people's throats. Teaching should be teaching kids the basics they need to have a good life, you know, to progress through school, you know, go to uni if you want to go to uni, be a tradie if you want to be a tradie. You know, let people do their job. You know, it's not up to governments to tell parents how to parent. It's a parent's responsibility. Let parents be parents. You know, that's what they're there to do. So, yeah, I think government's just all over us at the moment. It sort of feels like we've got a rash on us.
Yeah.
The one that we can't cure. Unless we get rid of them.
Yeah. So we've recently heard that I think 15% of the big build spending, which is like $15 billion, has gone to criminals and organised crime.
Yep.
How do you think we got in this position where that's occurred?
I'll tell you, that's pretty bloody easy. Now, I've had to deal with the CFMEU. Now, I'm going to say this first, right? There's a lot of good members in the CFMEU. I have a lot of friends that are still in the CFMEU. So I'm not going after members, I'm going after the organisers because they're the arseholes in the joint, right? It's that simple. Now, I've had to deal with these pricks my whole life and they are bullies. How did we get to this point where the corruption got to where it is today? Basically, it was Daniel Andrews and the way he set up a few things he set up wrong. The procurement process, the way he pushed the AWU out of the works that we have in this state. People have to sort of know a bit of history here. The AWU used to do the civil construction, right? Think rail, think roads. The CFMEU used to do construction. So let's say we talk about a rail line. The AWU would do the rail, the CFMEU would do the station, all right? That's how it used to be. Andrews pushed the AWU sideways and the CFMEU had control of the whole thing, right? Once they got control, the corruption started creeping in. First thing that happened was the Labor government got rid of our state-based union watchdog, got rid of that. Then the federal government got rid of the federal union watchdog. That went sideways. Once that went, it was a free-for-all. Right, and these guys have extorted, and a lot of people are saying the 15 billion is a conservative figure. Some are saying it could be as high as 30. But let's say, for example, it was only $1.5 billion. That's still $1.5 billion the Victorian taxpayers are lost to criminal organisations. The Hurstbridge line, that line was just ground zero of corruption. You had a corrupt labour hire company. You had bikies on site. You know, they were dealing drugs on site. They were basically extorting women for sex. You know, they ran the job. The Hurstbridge line, the CFMEU ran the job. The builder didn't run the job, right? The government lost total control of it. And there's a few reasons for it. I talked about procurement earlier. You got to understand in construction, we used to use labour hire as a last resort. Like I'd have a guy go on holidays and I'd ring up a labour hire company and say, look, can I have a bloke for a couple of weeks? I've got a bloke away and I'd have a bloke for a couple of weeks. Construction's got lazy and they've reversed that. They're now using labour hire as a first resort, probably because they want to shift the liability of employing people sideways, right? So now they're using labour hire as a first resort. And a lot of that corruption came through those labour hire companies onto site and the union organisers and OH&S reps that, you know, has been well documented. What I'm saying here isn't groundbreaking news, but that's how it's come about. And we have to fix that, right? Victorians, we need infrastructure projects. Let's be plain and simple. We're a growing population. We still have to invest in infrastructure. But Victorians have to get value for money for that spend, right? And not have $15 billion just, you know, fly out the door. So we need to change the way things work on construction sites in this state. Now, the government will say, well, you know, there's 70 charges being laid and 140 companies have been deregistered. Well, that tells you how much corruption was on those sites. If they've deregistered 140 labour companies on big build sites, that's disgraceful. You know, that shows you how much corruption was in there, and we still don't know how much is still in there. And when they go, oh, we've laid 70 charges, well, is that 70 people, one charge each, or is that one person with 70 charges? Because you can have multiple charges. So I think a figure, it might be 10 to 15 people, I'm not quite sure. But we need to change the way business is done in Victoria so the taxpayers actually get proper value for money on construction sites. And it's something I've, you know, fought hard for. I talked about a bill we tried to introduce into Parliament, getting police checks onto building sites, right? Police have to have police checks, nurses do, doctors do, MPs do. It's not unusual. So why can't we do it on government building sites?
Do you think it's a failure of the system and IBAC that they haven't been able to get on there and investigate?
It's not a failure of IBAC. It's a failure of the powers that IBAC have been given.
So do they need follow the money power? Do they need the ability
absolutely.
to make, so they need to look more like ICAC in New South Wales?
Yeah, well, you look at the New South Wales model, ICAC, you know, a Premier lost his job up there because he forgot to declare a $3,000 bottle of wine, right? So, yes, they need broader powers. They need follow the money powers. And IBAC should be there. I mean, it is the independent, broad-based anti-corruption commission, whatever it's called. It's no use having it if they can't do anything with corruption. Okay, I mean, geez, we saw Daniel Andrews go in there and he couldn't remember and he just answered that for 2 days straight. You know, I don't recall, I don't remember. It's not good enough. I think the Victorian public sort of have an expectation that if you have a corruption commission, that they have the power to fix corruption or at least have a recommendation. They could put forward a recommendation to say this is corrupt behaviour. And then further investigation could be pending from that determination. And I think that's what Victorians expect. That's what they deserve. Do they? Yes, they should have follow the money powers. You know, to be honest, IBAC should have the power to get a group of forensic accountants and to go through every account on that these big build projects and find out where the money went and who it went to. Okay, now, I'm not suggesting any member of Parliament was involved, but how do we know there wasn't government officials? How do we know there wasn't other people that had their finger in pies? And IBAC don't have the power to
But wouldn't people say to that if there is legitimate corrupt criminal behaviour going on, that is the area for VicPol to investigate?
Oh, of course, it should be referred to VicPol. I mean, that's criminal law. So, but if IBAC at least had the powers to investigate more broadly, right, and make those recommendations to say that this has been corrupt and or criminal behaviour, and then they could present that evidence to VicPol to then prosecute. Well, isn't that what we deserve? I mean, isn't that an expectation of any person in a pub that would go, yeah, well, that makes sense. So you know, but the union's been out of control, and you've got to remember, the union was the BLF, right? The Builders Labourers Federation under Normie Gallagher. You know, they got disbanded or shut down, and it went from being the BLF and just morphed into the CFMEU, right? The same characters just moved across. Now, people have said to me, should we get rid of the CFMEU? Well, I don't have anything against unions as such. They're fine. But if we get rid of the CFMEU, it's going to just rebrand itself under something else, right? And whatever it will be called, Construction Union Victoria, who cares? So that's not, getting rid of the CFMEU is not the problem. We've got to get rid of the criminal element and the corrupt behaviour out of the CFMEU. Police checks would go a long way in doing that. So it's not necessarily disbanding it, let's fix it. That's what we need to do.
But here's the more philosophical question on that. At what point does it become government being too overbearing with police checks on building sites, and where do we kind of lose that give and pull between the freedom for business to kind of conduct themselves and everything being looked over by a government body?
When taxpayers' money is being spent, right, we need to make sure that that's done properly. As I said, police checks are not unusual. A lot of professions have police checks, okay? So to have police checks on construction sites isn't onerous. It only takes 24 hours. And you know what? If someone got booked for speeding, they're going to get a job, right? It's not the people that stole a Mars bar that you're not going to have on a building site. It's the bloke that, he got busted because he had 18 kilos of cocaine and he was selling this cocaine, right? They're the ones you're after, or the bikie or the standover men or whatever else. So, we're not going after petty criminals here. I mean, we all do dumb shit, right? We're going after the people that we know are not, fit for purpose on a building site is the best way to put it.
Something that annoys me is we pay like top dollar for the executives, people like Jerome Weimar and all them people that
Captain Crunch. Yep.
All the people at that top level, and it still this corruption's happening under their watch and nothing's happening to them. So why do you think there's no accountability in the executive?
It's a good question. I think we have so many layers of bureaucracy that they can actually manage to, although they may be aware of the behaviour, they can manage to distance themselves from it. Look, you've seen the Premier answering questions on it, and her standard line is, if anyone knows such corrupt behaviour, they should refer it to the relevant authorities, okay? Standard line coming out. And to a point, she is correct. But it's those that knew about it that didn't pass it on to the relevant authorities that should come under the microscope. Like, did the Premier know about it? If the Premier stands up there and says, I referred it to the relevant authority, great. Give us the email when you knew about it and give us the email when you referred it off. Okay, let's be really clear on it. And that is something IBAC should be able to investigate. Right? Well, Premier, you were made aware on this day. This person said they emailed you. When did you refer that off? Show us the proof that you referred it off. Because to be honest, for the Premier to stand up there and just say, I referred it off to the relevant authority. Well, what, you really think Victorians, you expect us to trust what you say? After we've found out all the common games debacles and all the crap behind that, does she really expect Victorians just to sit back and go, no worries, Premier, we believe you? No, show us when. Show us every referral you had, and then when you referred it off, show us every time you were made aware of corruption on big build sites, and then show us when you referred it off as your time of Minister for Infrastructure and as Premier. Okay, because you've got to remember, the Premier was in that job for the best part of a decade. Now, she would have known long before now. I can tell you now, I was in the job 2 months and I had a bloke bashing on my door telling me about the corruption out on the Hurstbridge line.
Everyone knew about it.
Oh, of course they did. I mean, I think I said in Parliament it was the worst kept secret in Victoria.
Well, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to see how much it's costing and know that there's corruption happening.
Budget blowout after budget blowout after budget blowout. I mean, where'd they think the money was going? If the Premier wants to be transparent, there's a way to do it.
Yeah.
Produce the documentation.
Yeah.
It's really simple.
And what effect is this corruption and these budget blights having on housing and our housing targets?
Housing targets, well, the government's housing targets are totally stuffed. They're not going to meet them. Well, I think with the corruption blowouts, I'm going to separate it from housing a bit. Although $15 billion would have built a lot of social housing, being that when the government took over, there was about 10,000 applications. Now there's 65,000 because they did nothing for 6 years. But when we talk about housing and housing targets, and we're talking about the construction sector as a whole, what people don't realise out there is what the government has done to the construction sector, right? We have roughly about 20,000 builders in Victoria, but only 6,000 are practising. The government, especially in the last 12 months, has brought in legislation after legislation after legislation, just hammering builders, one after another, after another, after another. Knee-jerk reaction to the Porter Davis debacle, right? The latest one is the minimal financial requirements that they're trying to get through regulation at the moment. You've always got to strike a balance in everything. When it comes to building homes, you got to have buyer protection, but you can't put the builders under that much regulation that they don't want to build anymore. Because if you've got targets of 80,000 a year, you need builders to build them. We got over 20. The figure's about 24,000 less trades now than what we had 18 months ago, right? So people are leaving the industry. Everyone should sit back. When you have that amount of exit out of an industry, you've got to ask yourself why. Why are they going, right? How can we make the system fairer? Now, I can tell you now, after all the legislation they've brought into this parliament, there's still not one bit of legislation that protects deposits. Not one. But every bit of legislation they've brought in, like fines builders, and I'll give you an idea of one that is totally ridiculous that they've brought in, is now builders are subject to a 10-year, what we call minor defect liability period. Now, you got to understand what a minor defect is. A minor defect can be a small crack in your cornice at home, right? Just a hairline crack. That's a minor defect. Now, after 10 years, right, how is a builder meant to be liable for that? It could be a crack in the ground on the tile. Because you know what? Well, I don't know down in my area, but in Melbourne, we get earthquakes every now and again, right? The builder can't be liable for minor defects. It used to be 2 years, and 2 years is a good time frame because what happens with houses is they move in seasons, okay? So you go hot, cold, you do that for a couple of seasons, you get all the movement you're going to have. 10 years is too far, but they don't address things that need to be addressed at the front end, like waterproofing, for example. Every house gets waterproof, but we don't have waterproof inspections. That protects consumers. So there's ways to go about this that makes it fairer for builders and fairer for consumers. And I've said it in Parliament before, I hate dodgy builders. I want them out of the industry, and I'd be the first one. And they go, we suspend their license. I go, no, don't bloody suspend it, cancel it, right? If you've got a bloke that took a deposit without the warranty insurance, that guy should not be a builder, all right? Cancel his licence, piss off, he can go somewhere else. Really that simple. But the government hasn't done that. And all they're doing at the moment is they're belting the building industry from pillar to post. And builders, I know a lot of builders my age are saying, we're done, we're out. We're not playing in Victoria anymore. We're going elsewhere. You know, look like you're itching to answer something.
Go to Noosa.
No, I was just going to ask, what do you think in terms of housing and housing prices? Is it a demand issue or a supply issue?
Look, there's a lot of factors that when we talk about housing affordability, competition is always a good thing. So when we talk about land, I'll talk about greenfield development for a moment. If we had more land out there and more competition between the developers, then our land prices would come down. That's, you know, if you have a greater supply than the demand, then you can go to one bloke around the corner and go, oh, there's a block around the corner for 250 grand. What are you going to do on this one? And he might want to get rid of it. Oh, I'll give it to you for 240, right? So when you got more supply, you got less demand, power sort of comes back to the purchaser. So I think supply has been a big issue, especially when it comes to land. Now, when we talk about housing construction, part of the problem we've had in the domestic sector has been the big build in Victoria, because you might be a framing subcontractor, so you might have been taking home $1,500 building frames, but you could go on a big build site and take home $3,000, right? So what's happened there is rates have gone up into the domestic housing market, and that's because, as I said, I love infrastructure, but the government did too much at once, and it put enormous pressure on the labour supply, and therefore prices went up. So, and look, me being an ex-chippy, I'm not going to belt a tradie around for, well, who wouldn't go somewhere if they could take home $3,000 a week? Well, both of you guys would.
100%.
You want to be sitting here doing this podcast with me, you'd be going, stuff Wayne Farnham, I'm going to go earn $3,000 a week. So I don't blame the subbies, I blame the government. They created the mess, and this is why our housing affordability is now getting further out of reach for Victorians. But I think what we have to do now in housing, and to make housing more affordable, I think we need to lean into technology a bit more. We've got the same building practices we've had for 100 years, and that is becoming expensive. The materials are expensive, the labour's expensive. So I think we need to lean into technology. You might have seen 3D homes now, homes that get printed, and there's a lot of products coming out of Europe. I saw one the other day, they're like big Lego blocks that you just lift up and put on and glue together, and those type of things. So I think we need to introduce more different styles of housing. When I say styles, technology-based homes, to start bringing that price back down again, to make things more affordable. Because, in my perfect utopia, I'd love to see every millennial in Gen Z be able to afford a home. So I think we need to lean that way. To start.
And do you think, is the solution taking spaces with low density and making them medium to high density, or is that urban sprawl instead, or a combination of both, obviously?
Look, I think what we've got to do with housing is we have to have options. So there's spaces for high density, medium density and low density. Okay, generally your regions will be lower type density. I think in metropolitan Melbourne, I think there is definitely space for medium density in the outer suburbs, and obviously higher density in the inner city, where you want your population to be. That's where you got everything there, the public transport, et cetera, et cetera. And hence was our planning policy we put through about extending the capital city zone to accommodate for that population growth. But I think the most important thing is to at least have options for people. And at the moment, the government's 63 precincts around the place isn't giving anyone any options. This is what's happening, boom, boom, boom. Well, when you start to give people choice, and let's say, where do you live?
Kew.
Of course you would. Only joking. All right, but let's say if you could buy a house in Warragul, where I live, if you could buy a house for $600,000 on a 600 square metre block of land, and you got a couple of kids or whatever, and your parents lived in Kew, and you went, well, I can buy a house in Warragul for $600,000 or a 3-bedroom unit in Kew for God knows what, $2 million. If you're a bit younger and you want to stay out of family, you can live an hour from home and you can have a house for like $600,000. Well, would it worry you that much travelling an hour to see your mum and dad if you're going to save $1.4 million rather than having a 3-bedroom house in Kew? And I think for younger generations to get into the market, we have to have those options for them in the market. It's no use having no options. And then it's your choice whether you want to, save $1.5 million, move a bit further away, but and get something you can afford, or do you want to, go for the higher mortgage or whatever? But at the end of the day, it's all about choice and having the options so you have the choice, and that's what we should be looking at.
Yeah, so I think we'll shift off housing now, and I think, You've been appointed parliamentary secretary to the leader of the opposition. How's that been like?
Oh, well, I'm on my third leader. I did say to Jess, maybe I shouldn't do this job. It hasn't gone too well. Oh, look, I love the role, and whether it was under Brad or, John, Brad, and now Jess, it's a role I actually really enjoy because you get an insight, probably a bit more of what goes on a little bit more behind the scenes. Jess and I communicate a lot, and that's one thing. It's probably a strength of Jess is her communication skills, not just with me but with colleagues in general. It's a different role. You do fill in functions for the leader if Jess isn't available, and especially, order of precedence probably goes Jess, shadow minister, then me, but everyone's busy. But you fill in functions. But look, I really enjoy the role. It's a lot of people have said to me, did you want to be in shadow cabinet and this and that? Now, I sat back and thought about when I first got this job, and I thought, I know nothing about Parliament or how Parliament works or anything like that. So I really wanted to do my apprenticeship, so to speak, and learn because I knew nothing, literally nothing. So I've really enjoyed, I've been here 3 years now. I've really enjoyed the 3 years, and I've started to learn a lot probably in the last 12 months because the first couple of it was a bit confusing. But look, I just enjoy all the roles I do, whether it's Assistant Minister for Jess, I'm Assistant Minister for Building, Planning, Housing Affordability. I'm also an acting Speaker as well. I've been doing that since 2023. I took that role on so I could learn the procedures of the Parliament, essentially. But look, I just enjoy it all. And I've always used the view, because politics is a funny game, I might only get one chance or one term, so I'm just going to make the most of it. And, whatever happens in 2026 happens in 2026. Hopefully I get re-elected, obviously, but if I didn't get re-elected, at least I could walk out and go, well, I've had a lot of experiences while I've been in the place. So, look, I love it. It's just a great job. It's a different experience, a very unique place to work.
Yeah. Well, speaking of being re-elected, you're obviously a regional MP. You would probably feel it more potently than other people, the rise of One Nation. Does that affect your decision-making in Parliament as a result?
No, not at all. You got to remember, my first responsibility is to the community of Narrabeen, right? I did have a bloke, put up a post the other day, and he said, you should be a One Nation candidate. And I responded to him. I thanked him for his compliment, essentially, but I said, look, it was the Liberal Party that gave me this opportunity. It was the Liberal membership that put me in the position I'm in. And I actually said in the quote, it would be un-Australian of me to turn around and then go, well, I'm going to fly the One Nation flag. No, my decision-making in my role is purely based on what's best for my community. It's not political. I will argue my points with my own colleagues as well as the government as what's best for the community for Narrabeen. So, yeah, very short, sharp answer, no.
What's the biggest thing the Victorian government hopes voters don't understand before the next election in November?
I think the biggest thing that the Victorian population has probably lost sight on is our debt. I think they're that used to debt now, they're a little bit numb to it. But when we start talking figures of 160, 170, 180, 190 billion dollars, when you're talking figures of $1 million an hour in interest, right? This is something that is going to take a long time to get back under control. It's not a magic wand. You can't walk in and say, we're going to fix this, bang, and it's going to happen. It's got to take very good management to bring that debt down and bring that interest level down or interest bill down. And to do that is we've got to get the economy moving. And I think most people don't see the debt. Like people feel fuel price rise. They go, oh, shit, petrol's $2.50 a litre today. It was $2.20 yesterday. They see that. They feel that. They don't feel debt. And that's the problem. I think they don't realise the pressure it puts on just delivering our essential services when we're spending $1 million an hour in interest. $24 million a day. Well, in my patch, after 30 days, they could have built my hospital for $600 million. Right. So I think that's the thing Victorians are most numb to, because it just doesn't impact them directly as like a fuel price rise or interest rate rise on their house loan. And that worries me. That concerns me, that they are sort of numb to that.
And what are some like hot button issues out in regional Victoria?
Oh, shit, there's a lot.
Obviously, potholes are a massive one.
Oh, yeah, roads, roads and roads. Infrastructure delivery into regional Victoria, unless you live in Bendigo, Ballarat or Geelong, because they're Labor seats. Look, especially in my patch, like our new hospital is so in need. Like our current hospital was built in 1939, and the staff are great, but the hospital's absolutely rooted. Infrastructure delivery is really the biggest problem in the regional Victoria, and we're disproportionately represented when it comes to the budget. 25% of Victorians live in regional Victoria. We're lucky to get 11% of the infrastructure spent, funds into regional Victoria. And again, most of that is Bendigo, Ballarat and Geelong. So when you look at places like Gippsland, it's no different to me, or you talk to the member, Gippsland South, Gippsland East. We all say the same thing, is infrastructure is the biggest issue. But when you look at an area like Narracan, you got Warrigal and Drouin, who over the last decade they class them as a town now together. It's the fastest growing town in Australia. The government has spent 5/8 of stuff all in it. That's a problem. So really, infrastructure delivery, roads, essential services, that's where they're failing in regional Victoria.
Well, what would you say when voters ask, what does the Victorian Liberal Party have to do to win the state election next year?
It's a fair question. Look, we have to present, I don't want to say convince, because I don't like that word. We have to show the Victorian public what our policies will be, what our plan for Victoria is going to be, and to prove to the Victorian public that we're going to be a better government than what's currently in at the moment, okay? And we can only do that, our policies are starting to get released, they're coming out. And it's our policies going forward where we have to, for the Victorian community to have faith in us to be a better government, that their lives will be better under us than what they are currently under the current government. And that's, I think, the key message we have to get out there. And a lot of that will be with the policies we put forward. We've already said there's certain taxes we're going to reduce, like stamp duty thresholds, for example. There'll be no stamp duties on property up to $1 million. We've said we will be reversing the emergency services levy, reversing the increase, so taking it back to what it was. The taxes on schools, the taxes on health. We're going to remove all those. There was 5. I think I've named 4. Can't remember the other one. That's all right. So we just have to present that case to Victorians.
So how do we cut these taxes and also reduce the debt? They seem to be, that's like all
seems
in the water.
Counterintuitive, doesn't it? You can't tax your way out of debt. It's really simple. I'll be really blunt. You cannot tax your way out of debt, because when you keep taxing people, they leave. When they leave, your economy starts to drop, right? The only way to get out of debt is to get the economy moving, to have what we call more natural taxes, not the inflated taxes. So, and that is the secret to it. And I'll tell you about Paraguay, interesting country. Paraguay, same population as Australia, right? They had massive inflation, massive debt, massive poverty. They blew up their whole tax system and started again. They went to what they call a 10-10-10 rule. 10% company tax, 10% personal tax, and a 10% VAT, right? Imagine us only paying 10% tax. How good would that be? All of a sudden, everyone that had left Paraguay started to come back because they got a 10% company tax rule. They took their poverty rate from 60% down to 17%. Massive turnaround. So by changing the tax system, they stimulated their economy. And that's what we need to do. We need to get our economy going. We can't keep taxing people. It won't work. There'll be no one left in the state to pay any tax. So my thing is get the economy going, get private investment going. Private investment, not government spending, okay? Get that private investment coming back into the state. Stop turning people away with the taxes we're putting on everything. When you run a business in this state, they're so bloody hard to run. Like they just get hammered left, right and centre. So that's how you do it.
And I think our last question, if that's okay,
I've got a good one for the last one. This will be the second
last question. What do you think is the one big issue that nobody's talking about?
Homelessness. Homelessness. It's a massive issue and it's something that really needs to be addressed. Even in my patch, never saw rough sleepers on the street. Now I see them all the time. Homelessness is a massive issue in this place. And I actually said it quite a while ago. I said, I think homelessness will be our next pandemic if we're not careful. And when you got 65,000 applications for housing, that's where it's moving into. And homelessness is something I'm pretty passionate about. It's something that needs a lot of attention, because it's people living in some pretty bad conditions. Yeah. What's your question? Where do I get my hair cut? Cut it myself.
Well, you're obviously very charismatic, as we learned today. You've got plenty of good ideas. Will we ever see Wayne Farnham, Premier of Victoria?
No, shit, no. No, shit. We already had Henry Boldy. He was bald too. No, you definitely won't. I'll put it on record very early on. I'm really happy with how Jess Wilson's going, right? She's
obviously after Jess.
No. Look, I think I got a lot of faith in Jess. Are you asking me if Jess wasn't there, would I like to be leader? No, I do not. I'm 55. I'd like to see younger ones come through. I really would. There's nothing wrong with age, but Victoria needs younger leadership. Yeah. There's this state's got a good future. We just need the right leader. Mm. And, I'm on the back end of my working career. I love what I do. Don't get me wrong. They can carry me out in a box. Yeah. And I'm happy to support whatever role Jess has for me in the team. But no, I don't want to be leader. Christ, I don't have her energy. She's a bloody superwoman. No, I'm pretty happy where I am.
No. So. And just one last one quickly. Big election coming up, 28th of November, I think. How do you think our chances are? Pretty good. Yeah.
Look, it's a big election. We've got to win 16 seats to get into government. So I said we really have to communicate to the Victorian people what we're going to do differently to this current shit government we have. Actually, if we want to do something differently, just do everything opposite to what the government's doing. But we have to convince Victoria of that.
Yeah.
But we're in with a really, really good chance. I think Jess has brought a fresh aspect to our leadership. I like the way she goes about things. I like the way she includes her colleagues in everything. As I said earlier, she communicates very clearly. And she's really smart. Like, have you spoken to Jess?
Mm.
Bloody hell, every time I talk to her, I can feel my IQ dropping there. Like, she's really smart. She's really good at what she does. And I think Victoria's, to coin the phrase, Victoria's ready for a fresh start. I think Jess Wilson will bring that.
Yeah.
I had to get that in there. And here we go again, another division.
Well, with that said,
thanks for coming on, Wayne.
Pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me. I could have done that with a beer.
Thanks, Wayne.